Hello, I'm back today for a second video, and I'm going to start to read what I now call the Decentralist Manifesto. What I'll do is I'll make it the second video each day until I'm finished with it. This may be self-indulgent because I wrote it and I'm reading my own work as opposed to talking about other things. But I'm not going to be content until I have presented this, because I think only then will I feel that if somebody really wants to know why I think like I think, I've done what I could to show them. I'm going to read, I call it the Decentralist Manifesto now. In just a moment I'm going to go over there and I'm going to start to read. And I'm actually going to read the preface to the 1976 edition of the working papers for the Homestead Engineer's Handbook. This never really reached publication. I made 40 copies of the first edition, and I'm not sure how many copies, if any. I guess I made a few copies of the second edition. All right, so I'm going to go over there. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know how long it's going to take. But I'll read through this today, and then that preface, and I'll put that online, and then I'll decide what to do next. So come with me if you want. Bye for now. Working papers for the Homestead Engineer's Handbook, prepared by Frank Anderson. Preface to the 1976 edition. As a first edition of these working papers, I printed, bound, and published 40 copies. In the strictest sense, this was an edition, but in a commercial sense, it was not. My purpose at the time was to make clear a moral code that was developing in me in such a way as to explain some of my actions to my friends and family. 40 copies served that purpose. It is clear to me now that I will not pick up this work again. What was included in these working papers represented roughly a tenth of my research. However, the work exhausted me to the extent that although I would contribute to others' efforts in this field, I will not assume further onus. My research has gone on, but it has gradually immersed itself in the realm of the personal. I no longer fill out note cards. Very little has changed in this second edition. I have included erag stiffs, that's Gary Fitz, discussion of a computer program to arrange spaces. Other changes are merely in word choice. I have renamed the introduction more accurately. 2 years have passed since my intensive work toward the development of a Homestead Engineer's Handbook ended. I can now reflect on it with some objectivity. Frankly, I find myself in awe of it. I could not write it now. It is no less than a new and a prehistoric scientific paradigm. And although research is rapidly turning its full attention toward alternative lifestyles, this research is still without the guidance of an appropriate paradigm. Spelled wrong. Energy is still the common denominator. I was criticized for my heavy use of few and questionable sources for my introduction, especially for my use of Robert Ardrey and the doctrine of genetically programmed behavior in humans. I believe I unwisely let my introduction assume the aspect of a research paper in which it would have been inappropriate to use such limited sources. The statement is not, however, a research paper, but rather a statement of opinion based on a certain amount of research. Accordingly, I have renamed this introduction the Decentralist Manifesto. As far as my heavy use of Robert Ardrey is concerned, I feel somewhat justified by the publication of Edward Wilson's Sociobiology, which was not available at that time. I'll admit to a roughness in this whole work. However, considering the few resources an unfinanced literature major and carpenter could bring to bear, I feel I covered as much ground as possible at the cost of much polish. In any case, this statement is probably at its most effective as it is and embedded in We're Alive, Utopia. That's the work that Michael Hernkane and that monster that I showed earlier. And this is the section. What is the current state of centralized civilization? The pace of developments has picked up. In the past 3 years, the United States has been through the worst recession since the 1930s. This is the U.S. pulled out of by increasing its debt. New York City has defaulted, and the net migration to large cities has reversed. All in all, I feel that the peaking and initial decline of centralized civilization has followed a nearly optimal curve for long-term social stability. President Ford appears to have an awareness of the problem that Richard Nixon did not. Solar heat is now coffee table and cocktail party material. Wood-burning stoves are reappearing. I hope the curve continue to be gentle. Since I wrote the working papers, I have accumulated more personal and concrete experience with decentralized living in the United States. I find that the reacquiring of a lost material culture is even more complicated than I had thought. The fall will be far for the unprepared. I have also found it more pleasant than expected, however. What about my computer orientation? It is still valid and worth the attempt for the federal government to program Homestead design. However, I have lost much faith in any solution emanating out of the federal government, even a progressive land tax. Local resistance will be overwhelming. The future of the United States will be a violent one. In sociobiology, Wilson provides the following quotation from Garrett Hardin. Garrett Hardin, 1956, has called a pankreston a word or concept covering a wide range of different phenomena and loaded with a different meaning for each user. A word that attempts to explain everything but explains nothing. On reading this, I found myself asking, is centralization, or even more so decentralization, a pankreston? Well, I think not. But a clear and simple definition would help. Centralization is the process by which systems are enlarged in scale, not in complexity, and in a finite world reduced in number. Decentralization is the opposite of this process. Many people who have read these working papers have called them depressing. That surprised me because I had felt that I was making a constructive statement. If this must be ranked among the recent Jeremiads, I feel I deserve the credit for basing my Jeremiad on a solution. Solutions are what one hears so little of nowadays, especially long-term solutions. I believe it is the fact that virtually everyone is locked into their pigeonholes that makes this work scare them, and their interpretation of it negative, or, to change my metaphor, they find they cannot benefit from this work while keeping their heads buried in the sand. For me, it remains an effort toward the untying of the modern knot with the least human anguish over the next 100 years. Wage Kortson, that's a pen name that I used. Dutch Corner, December 1975. And here we have the working introduction, the Decentralist Manifesto. I'll begin that tomorrow. We'll see how this goes.